What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Thinking Market. Obviously, this is the first episode, so I just want to, I guess, do a welcome, but also a couple like housekeeping, food for thought before we kind of get into essentially what the substance of this show is going to be. Um, I will say that this is not my first podcast. I've done a couple years ago. It was called Geigonomics and Vacuous Vocation, and essentially I learned the value of humor and being less autistic through doing podcasts because it got very dry and boring, and even for myself. So that was no good. But also, I'm currently working on my PhD program, and I'm teaching as a professor at the Menger Institute. And professors profess. And I realized the value of those podcasts, how they helped me give presentations, give lectures, because I had this practice of speaking, and primarily with myself. But I think, a professor can profess whether it's to one person or 100 or 1,000. So the significance and value that I've taken from that, I feel like I need to kind of continue. Because working on the PhD process, it's just write 300 pages, turn it into a book. There's no classes. And I'm just doing a lot of reading and writing. And the writing and reading is great, but I think that I want to speak because formulating thoughts through the pen is fantastic. But like, if I just have all these great ideas that just go into a book, but it's not read, then how valuable is it? And I think obviously podcasts are such a popular medium for ideas in the contemporary day that like it's kind of foolish of me to not try to share these ideas through podcasting or lecturing, and just leave it to writing alone. And I think all the stuff I'm reading is really interesting to myself. So I hope it's also interesting to other people. I think I can kind of, that's the role of a professor, is to like be a conduit for great ideas, and bring them to light to new people. So that's kind of what I'm hoping to do here. Yeah, essentially it also benefits me in a medium to think as well. So with that being said, uh, the structure essentially that I want to follow is like the subtitle of this podcast would be economics, philosophy, metacognition, right? I'm studying economics. I want to teach economics. I feel like economics is such a beautiful set of ideas, a philosophy. It comes from the Greek word oikonomia, so it means household management, but it's also like human action. It's choices being demonstrated in real life. However, there's also philosophy. I think economics is I guess, a subset of philosophy, and philosophy encompasses economics. And so I do want to get philosophical. My PhD research, the thesis is the economics of suicide. So I feel like that's beyond just economics. It gets into what I guess I like to say when people ask me about it, is that it's an opportunity not only to like obviously write about suicide and suicidality and stuff, but also the choice of life and the philosophy of life. And that's kind of where I want to merge with metacognition, because obviously there's like people who don't know you and they don't have your best interest in this world, because they don't even know your interest. So it's up to you to find your interest. And life, in the same way that suicide is multivariable, so is life. So is the meaning to life. The same things don't make this different people happy. Even the same person can, like something one day and not the next. And as a digression, I feel like I've come to realize that like just pursuing the things you enjoy in life is phenomenal, because when you pursue those things, you can discover other things you like in life, and you may even enjoy them more than the current thing you enjoy doing, right? So you can always kind of unfold and evolve by pursuing your passions and discovering new things you enjoy in life. Yeah, so I guess the theme is all this, like, what's it for? I think it's for freedom. Um, there's many forms of freedom, but specifically through podcasting is like the sharing of ideas. Everyone who does a podcast thinks that they have something to offer, and obviously that's what I'm doing. So it's whatever you want to say, presumptuous, but I think I have something to offer, right? So, and in a way, like, because I want to offer, three different relative uh, thematic ideas throughout like a podcast episode. Hopefully, there's something there that like you can take a value, and it's gonna all relate to freedom. Essentially, anarchism. That's what I teach. That's what we teach at the Menger Academy. The freedom to choose how you want to live. Uh, to understand that, yeah, there's programming in this world, and there's also deprogramming. And the whole point of freedom is to not be a slave. Right now, like, contemporary life doesn't necessarily in the Western world have like the slavery of chains, but there's still the slavery of the mind, the tyrant of the mind, right? And it's in all of us. And so I think if we get rid of our own tyrant, the way to one do that is through facing this fear of freedom, and also through learning, and then really this is all for our own self-discovery. All these things go hand in hand. So yeah, I will say that I took a couple years off podcasting mainly to like make music, because I felt like, for one, music was still a free art in the early 2020s lockdown crisis, and two, I think I needed my own self-discovery, and I feel like what I've learned from that pursuit has really helped me. And if anything, I think it will only help me more as I really try to become a professor and pursue this career. So, with that being said, I just gave a lecture last weekend on the history of economic thought for our first pillar with the Menger Institute. And we begin with the Greeks, but like, everyone likes the ancient Chinese. Like, I'm talking Confucius and the Taoists, um, and primarily the Taoists. Like, there was like three different eras of ancient China, and then like the thinkers that correlated with each era, but primarily the Taoists, like Lao Tzu and some of his followers, were considered the first anarchists, and they really understood the nature of governance, of governments. And so for Lao Tzu in like 300 BC, 400 BC, around that time, he really came to the conclusion of detachment, because he understood the nature of governance but thought like governments were always going to be there. So he was like, okay, it's best just not be attached. In a sense, he was like pessimistic. But then he had, followers like Chuang Tzu, who was like considered the first anarchist. He arrived at individual anarchism, and like a lot of these ideas are, Tao Te Ching, following the way, the government that governs least govern best. So then we had, and I'm looking at this book, History of Economic Thought Before Adam Smith by Murray Rothbard. We had Pao Qingyan, and then Suma Qian. And I'm going to read this passage that Rothbard writes about Pao. to the common charge that he has overlooked good and benevolent rulers, Pow replied that the government itself is a violent exploitation of the weak by the strong. The system itself is the problem, and the object of government is not to benefit the people, but to control and plunder them. There is no ruler who can compare in virtue with a condition of non-rule. So I really like this ancient premise of this dichotomy of understanding what the government itself is. And this is what I heard from David Gordon, the paradox of anarchy, that the ancient the ancient Greeks said anarchy could work, but it's not a very good idea. And contemporary philosophers, contemporary people, will say anarchy is a good idea, but it can never work, right? So these ideas are nothing new, frankly. But obviously, like histories or ideas precede actions, so they take time to develop. Part of that is, culture, um, the general milieu of any time period throughout history. And we'll get into that more, but I think that's kind of the relative idea I wanted to mention about economics, that like it begins with human action and human beings, and perhaps, I'll elaborate on like anarchism more in the future, but I guess where that goes into like psychology is and maybe, okay, I'm jumping around a little bit, but with metacognition as well as like purpose and okay, let me jump around a little bit. I'm a fan of the Red Scare podcast, and I was listening to one of the recent episodes, and they're fantastic, highly recommend. But Anna was talking about how you'll never find happiness in this life, but you can find contentment, and recognizing that, people are people. And I think for a long time in my life, and probably a lot of people, we think we are pursuing happiness, but I think with the influence of like these ancient Chinese Taoists and whatnot and detachment, it comes back to being really content. And the way I distinguish happiness and contentment, I actually asked ChatGPT, because that's how AI is going to help with metacognition like no other. But yeah, it was essentially, the difference is that happiness is a short, ephemeral experience that is dependent on external conditions, whereas contentment is like a long, enduring feeling that is more internally dependent rather than externally dependent. And this was like a philosophy I personally had, I guess, throughout, that I kind of, I don't know, I think I tried to realize it most of my life, but like could finally formalize it, and maybe around high school, that like there's never a reason to be upset about anything in life. And I feel like that's such a powerful way to go through life. Things happen, of course, but like as compared to what, right? And then when you kind of put things into perspective that way, like that's the whole point of metacognition, is to, in a way, externalize our own thoughts and just really, I guess, consider alternative choices. I also saw this question generated by ChatGPT that like, is enlightenment, according to like the Buddhists, hyper metacognition? And I think that's a very interesting concept, where you can just literally look at all your thoughts, sit with them, analyze them, and try to logically choose from everything available. I think, and that's really a lot what a lot of Buddhist teachers say, is that like, if more people practice meditation, the practice that helps with, I assume, developing one's own metacognition, then like we live in a better world. And I think there's something to that. Just thinking about things more and choosing them rather than being reactive. Yeah, I think in a sense too, also tying it to economics, that like Okay, we'll get into money too. Actually, next pillar, Menger Institute, we're discussing money. It's free. Check it out. I'll link it too because it's my institute, and I would love everyone who's interested to be a part of it. You can attend virtually via Zoom. But anyways, we're talking about money and what's associated with everything, all goods and services in an economy. It's prices. So prices are signals, and they're multi-dependent too. On uh, scarcity, on consumer demand or perceived consumer demand, quality, um, all these different variables that people then determine how much they value something. And, more or less, that's what in the market people end up paying for things, right? Um, Obviously, this is a loose description of prices. I'm not trying to lecture here. But, shit. um, okay. I definitely lost that train of thought. We were just digressing way too hard. Whatever. Um, I guess also I do want to talk about finding purpose because I think economics, right? Like choices in the market, praxeology, the science of human action, which like economics is considered to be the queen of praxeology, is considered the best developed branch of human action, analyzing that people act. But psychology is the realm of why people act. Praxeology is just saying that people act. So purpose and psychology are kind of like, I want to say, like the flesh and organs to the skeleton that is economics. And I feel like that's a lot of what philosophy is choosing and why we choose, analyzing why we choose certain things. And yeah, I guess, damn, I'm sorry I lost that train of thought. I was definitely going somewhere. But I'm tired. Just finished some jujitsu. So, whatever. Obviously, I'll come back around to it and I'm just going to remember. And I'll throw it into the next episode. I'm thinking weekly episodes, nothing crazy, no video. Facial recognition is just like way too powerful these days. And I think going audio is cool too because then I don't have to worry about like what I look like or the setup, all that stuff that is really regardless to what is of actual value, which is the content, the ideas. That's what I want to offer. That's what I hope other people will find value in. Damn, I really thought I could do this with like 3 notes. One is just Taoist, the other is purpose, and the other is contentment. Um, oh, okay, yeah, sorry. Coming back to that. So basically with money, the type of money is so important to an economy because, okay, there's a whole history of money, right? It was from the barter system solving the coincidence of wants. Like if I'm bartering a cow for eggs, how many eggs is worth a cow? And like, how do you divide up a cow? Right? So you run into these issues of this coincidence of wants that like, oh, actually I need someone who also wants a whole cow. Like I can't just like, I mean, you can actually chop up a cow. Um, Surprise if you haven't realized that. Never mind. Gosh, it's gonna be so hard with these jokes, not knowing if they're landing or not. But whatever. So then money came along as like the medium of exchange to essentially say like, okay, we have this issue, this coincidence of wants, right? So money is basically going to facilitate um, as like a placeholder of value, that its value I will accept because I know that there was value to it yesterday and there's probably going to be value to it tomorrow. So we take money and we use money in the market. We can delay our consumption, and we can also use money to invest. And so over time, over history, obviously, governments, in their nature to plunder and exploit people, tried to take control of money, either through taxation or coin clipping, devaluing the money. If it was gold and silver coins in the metallic standard, they would try to infuse like copper and bronze and whatnot and clip the coins. All this very, very snaky stuff. And that's what they did, right? And then they, obviously impose legal tender laws, which is saying that like the money the government creates is backed by law, by decree. You have to take it, you have to accept it, you have to use it. You can't use competing currencies. That's not allowed. That's actually a crime. We'll throw you in prison. And then when the paper money arrived on the scene, yeah, it's there's nothing cheaper to produce than paper. And originally, yeah, it was like a banknote that this is like a receipt to a money warehouse, which became like banks. I don't want to lecture on this because it's like, whatever. But what happened is that money became political. It became politicized. And so when we have a politicized money, we have a politicized society. And that's the issue, is that money actually does influence so much. And that's why in studying economics, I'm able to trace it to suicidality. Because as money is devalued and there's inflation, people's time preferences is heightened in the sense that it's more present oriented, meaning that people are looking to consume now more in the present moment than in the later moment. And it's not the same as like, the Buddhist conception of being like in the present moment. It's a different type. It's not the same type of idea. Maybe actually there's something similar, but I don't know. I'm not trying to think about that right now. The point is that as money has become politicized, society has become politicized, materialism, these external values, materialistic values, also become increasingly more apparent, combined with like the secular aspect of Western culture. A lot of people lose this purpose because, say you're an atheist or agnostic, like religion, I don't want to get into the metaphysics about religion, but it gives you a way to live. It gives you, ideas to abide by, to follow, to pursue in God's will or your own. And so that gives people a lot of purpose. And when you kind of don't have that, it's not that like you're not necessarily religious, but like something else becomes your religion, whether it's like science or democracy or the natural cathedral aristocracy of like, the universities, media, politicians, like all of that stuff. Yeah, also the fact that like education is very significant. Money pays for that. And so people are programmed. The money that comes from like the Federal Reserve goes to the banks, to the friends of the banks. They loan it out. And so then a lot of investment projects, which results in, city architecture, is influenced. It comes from this money system, the monetary system. This is really also what holds people back from individual sovereignty and true freedom, is you can't have individual sovereignty without monetary sovereignty. And this is what I think I'm trying to write about and develop and research. And I think people need to realize this more, if you care for freedom and individual sovereignty, that you need monetary sovereignty. So, yeah, we'll get into money systems and stuff, issuing one's own currency, the dopamine currency, as Andrew Huberman has said, which I find really interesting, because I think that does correlate to like time preference and psychology and like the decisions we make and the way they manifest in action and whatnot. But coming back to this idea of happiness, is that we're driven socially by society to say we should be happy, which sounds great. But again, when you look at it now from this perspective that like, oh, maybe it's not, like it's just a choice, a selection of an adoption of values. Do you want to be happy, which sounds nice. Do you want to be content? And I think I want to be content because I try to pursue happiness. But happiness, you can't really know happiness without sadness. And I think in my pursuit of happiness just led me to like also exploring and feeling sad, which is just like, why? Why am I, feeling this way? So I think I just was pursuing the wrong values. I think now contentment is really like the mode I want to kind of live by, and realizing that, yeah, like life is hard, life is heavy. But you can be happy. I said happy. You can be content. But you can be happy too in contentment. I think contentment does encompass all the feelings. Like as children, we kind of feel all these things still. It's not like our feelings go away, but we just learn to repress, and like obviously we develop, our mind and ability to cope with things and stuff like that. So yeah, you can be happy. You can be sad too, though. That's the thing, is like you can feel everything and you can be content with that. And I think that's kind of a healthier way, at least speaking for myself, to pursue life. And yeah, I guess also for first time listeners who don't really know me, like who are like, oh, because a lot of people, when I tell them my research, they're like, oh, what made you think of that, blah blah blah. And I'm just like, my freaking society, like the way I see people, especially in my age, my generation. And on one hand, I think there's a feeling of like a loss of individual sovereignty, of power. And so like in a weird way, I think it is one's ability to like reclaim their power over themselves. I think that's maybe one variable that leads people to suicidality. But yeah, we can talk about that more. I just would love to like also see feedback in any way, or even just like subscribe or 5 stars, because something will help me kind of formulate more directions that like people may be interested in if you listened to this point, which I know you have because you're listening to this. You cannot not listen to this point. It's too late now. But I think that's mostly what I wanted to say for now. And then, yeah, every week I'm just going to bring some great ideas from these books, like probably the books. I don't know who the hell reads anymore, but I've been reading, and I have some sick ideas that I want to share. And that's what this podcast is about, the thinking market. These ideas obviously don't come from me, maybe 1 in a billion, but they come from the books, the great ideas, the thinkers before me. Like, this is the market of minds, of ideas that has existed and is still existing. I don't even think that, like, I think it's a freaking psyop to say that the younger generations are, like, dumb and just iPadded and brain rotted out. That is bullshit. I've met so many students my age, my generation, who are so impressive. And I just want to try to keep up with them and do my best in my part. And I think this is what I want to do in the way I can. And it helps me learn. It helps me think. It helps me want to keep, professing, frankly. Like, I'm just monologuing here, but that's what a professor does. I wish I could take questions. Maybe somehow we'll do a Q&A in the future, but I'm going to bring you economics, I'm going to bring you philosophy, and I'm going to bring you metacognition to help really change the way that we're all thinking, and deprogram a lot of us. Some of us are programmed. And to choose your own programming. I think that's what freedom is about, is you choose for yourself how you want to live, how you want to think, how you want to feel. If you can choose that, I don't think you can be more like individually, spiritually free than that. So with that being said, thank you.